Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started. We try to start things on time here. I'm Phil Davis, and I am the Chief Business Officer for Tower Data. I'm here with Tim Lee. Why don't you introduce yourself and bring us up to speed?
Yes, Phil, happy to be here. We got 15 minutes of a rapid fire session for everybody. So welcome everybody. We got 21 or so attendees so far. At Alchemy, what we do is that we create custom solutions for banks and financial services companies to launch their financial product. You can find out more at trustalchemy.com. No Phil for a long time, so thanks for the invitation, Phil.
Yeah, and Tim's considered an expert, frankly, in the space. He's been working with helping financial institutions prevent fraud for a long time. We met almost a decade ago as he was on that journey. So thanks for having us. Let's jump right in. So as the title said, it's about the email address. So let's talk about why the email address is a powerful data point for a good fraud prevention strategy.
Yeah, sure. Email is such an interesting instrument, right? We live and die with email, text messaging, and all of that on a day-to-day basis. Communicate with our peers, family members, conducting business, and so forth. And the email address is almost your nickname, right? In certain sense, that you are known as that phone number, email address, whatever it might be. So I've certainly had my email for 20 years now, ever since Gmail was created. So I've got an email out there that's being used for probably hundreds of thousands of times already. So I have all these breadcrumbs that I left in the universe out there, whether it's registering for a concert event or whatever it might be. My email, which is associated with me, it's out there. So people can, look me up by email on the internet, or they can associate me to my email address. So having that email address out there as a pseudo identity or pseudo PII for those of us that's working in the financial services company is actually an interesting piece of information for people to look me up, that I identify with that email. So that's why it's interesting and
Absolutely. Well, and you mentioned those breadcrumbs. As you talk about breadcrumbs, right? In the data world, we call those fields, right? We translate breadcrumbs into fields. And so what breadcrumbs and fields really become important to your algorithms?
Things that comes to mind is essentially a born on date, right? When was the first time the universe has ever seen my email address? That is super important. And if I make an analogy in the credit risk management space, for a lot of us that's in working in that space, is the first time the credit bureaus have seen you, right? That's a powerful piece of information to establish your credibility, essentially, in the credit world. And in this world, establish your identity to a certain extent, right? So if I have a 2-decade-long email address, I'm of a certain stature. But if somebody created an email address yesterday, for example, and come to apply for a loan or credit card, there might be some other meaning behind it. So that born on date is super important. And there's a couple of other fields we can get into later, but essentially, you always want to start at when was the first time we've seen, or the universe have seen, this email address.
Sure. Well, and people are committing fraud. They're getting smarter. They're getting faster, right? So some folks might be saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a whole bunch of emails right now, but I'm not going to use any of them until I'm ready to commit the fraud. And so their born on date could look older, but there isn't that activity. So where does activity come into play?
Right. And you're absolutely right. There are people out there that creates thousands of email addresses, right, and letting it age, because they've, the fraudsters are smart as well, right? They kind of figured it out. But we're ahead of the game a little bit here as well at Tower Data, is that there are a couple of other attributes about usage of this email address, and there's two definitions of usage. There is usage of how wide this email address has been around, right? Is it being used at Wells Fargo, Walmart, Target, you name it? And also there's a frequency kind of aspects to it. How popular, how frequent this email has been used in the recent time period, right? Same analogy we can make in the credit bureau space. How often do we see this person, making a payment or take out a loan on a credit bureau trade? And is it more recent? Are they looking for credit now, or is it pretty sporadic? So those two elements, popularity and velocity, right? How popular is this email being used out there, and how frequently are they trending up in terms of activities are two other points we can use to, again, use the word triangulation to figure out, this email has been born on 2-3 years ago, it looks semi-legitimate, but we've seen a spike in activity and popularity that may give you some sense of security or insecurity about how this person is presenting themselves in front of you on this face of this transaction.
Absolutely. So the other thing that we talked about in prep was sort of how an email is constructed, the makeup, and looking at either the syntax of the email or the domain of the email as part of a comfort level. Can you talk a little bit about what you're looking for in the domain or even in the syntax?
Right. I mean, if you look at it, if you look at the handle portion, which is the portion before the @ sign, right? It's impossible now for me to get tim@gmail or phil@gmail, right? It's just impossible to do now. So a lot of people are, having to find themselves making longer and longer email handles just to get an email address. And fraudsters are doing the same thing. If you see a lot of long strings of numbers and characters and just doesn't look right, so to speak, and that's a telltale sign of something is wrong with this handle, right? It's probably automatically generated, so to speak. And then there's a bunch of science we can, decipher out of the handle itself. Some lenders are out there counting the numbers of numbers or digits out of the entire handle. It's got a high percentage. It might be, fraudulent, or people are counting vowels and consonants and things like that out of that handle to see if that makes sense, in a linguistic sense of the world. And then there's a bunch of stuff that we can talk about in the domains, and whether it's .gov, .org, .com, or whether some of these domains doesn't exist. So I know there's another offering out there that validates the email address itself to see if it actually makes sense, to see if it's out there, right? If somebody constructs timmail.com, it's not even a valid domain. So whatever that email coming out of the domain, it's not valid. Maybe Phil would even chime in on that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done is as we've talked to our clients and talked to people like Tim, we've learned a lot. And what we try to do here is take away that heavy lifting for our clients who want to feed their algorithm. So from an email activity metrics, we've built fields that actually have longevity of an email, the date first seen, the velocity score, which represents how often we see the email, and the popularity score, which represents how widespread we see the email. We've also identified an opener indicator. So we know that if the email has been opened in the last 30, 60, 90 days, so we could associate activity with that email in addition to, the velocity scores.
Right.
And then when you add an email validation, obviously knowing that it's a good email is important, but beyond that, we've done some of the heavy lifting in terms of looking at a school. We look at domains and we let you know if it's an active domain, it's a good domain, or if it's a bad domain. We can look at the syntax of the email to see if the rules aren't applied. And we have a number of codes associated with that could be also fed into those algorithms. So we try to do the heavy lifting to make your job easier. So with that in mind, let's shift gears a little bit for some of the data points. Let's talk about identity for a moment. So what else can you do in terms of getting better associations tied to that email address to make you more comfortable that you're working with somebody, that isn't trying to commit fraud? Also, you obviously don't want false positives. We don't want to throw away, good leads. So where does identity come into play?
Yeah, the word is triangulation. Having lots of data on the email address itself, which is a very important piece of pseudo PII, is super interesting, right? There are some telltale signs you can find right away just by looking at the email address. But what if we pair the email address to your name and postal address, right? Has Tim's email address, where he lives, and so forth, have seen together, right? Again, out there in the universe, right? If I see these things being presented together over and over again, that gives me a sense of comfort that this combinations of identity has been presented out there, right? Then we can decipher whether this person is smart enough to use this, identity to defraud everybody in the past 10 years, or you can trust that this person has been, somewhat wholesome in the sense that this identity has been presented together. So that email to name to address triangulation, and how often the universe again have seen these three pieces of information together, again, gives you another levels of comfort, right? In terms
Right.
of, yes, I understand this person.
Yeah, and that's an interesting trend we're seeing. It was interesting, if we dial back 9 years ago when we first started seeing clients using our data in the fraud space, they were first mostly just interested in validating the email. This is a good email. Then it became like, how do I use these other fields in order to really identify that fraud? And most recently, we're seeing the triangulation, the importance of using our identity matching, our ability to go from email to full name and postal, and making that connection has become another important part. So once you've done this, right, and you've identified and you've put this all together, what do you do with that email once you've detected it as high risk? What are some of the opportunities you have?
Yes, so let's also consider the speed of things that are happening today, right? There's people can pick up their phone and start applying for credit or send payments. All of these high risk transactions are needs to be vetted. So when you have thousands of these transactions coming into your system, you don't have time to kind of adjudicate every single one of them. So the strategy of how do we use this information once we get our hands on it, and once we decipher whether this is good or bad, how do we do it? Traditionally we put them into a waterfall, right? You want to find the most effective, shall I say, the least expensive product out there. Namely, check out the email to see if it makes sense. Triangulate with their name and address, which you have on the application, to get rid of the 30% really bad things that you just can't verify, and focus on the 70%, which you can, ping a credit bureau and whatnot to get into more costly sort of offerings, right? To really figure out who they are. So to stack it, we always advise our clients is to find, something wrong with the email, something wrong with the IP address, things of that nature, right? Or the cookie on the computer is erroneous. Get rid of just throw away the easy top 30%. Really have your effort and focus on the bottom 70%. So that waterfall strategy works every time, and it just saves a lot of money at the end of the day.
Got it. So in summary, like if you think about a waterfall strategy, the idea is that what we provide from an email address is a very inexpensive beginning point of weeding out a lot of stuff, and then waterfall to the next, then waterfall to the most expensive before you start to do stuff.
Exactly. Just get rid of all the cases where it's ambiguous or just that's not good.
Got it. So all right. So now I'm putting on my marketer hat for a moment, right? And as a marketer, right, I want great leads. I want all my leads coming. I want all these leads to come in. I spend my money. I want to get a good conversion. I want a good ROI. I want to get the leads in. It breaks my heart to have them thrown out, but I know you got to throw out the bad stuff, right? But where do you work with the marketer to help them now that you've said, okay, these don't look like fraudulent leads, but you have all this data. Can you help them then say, gosh, these look like high value emails?
That's right. So on the acquisition side, right, your conversion rate might be 20, 30%. 100 people comes in, 20, 30% of people becomes a customer. And then maybe 20, 30% off top is just trash. But there is that middle 30, 40% that was interested, and the email and everything else validates, right? They just want to see what's going on. And also on the other side, what's happening today is that you don't want to burn your ISPs, meaning that for our audience, meaning that you don't want to send out a bunch of junk email to emails that you cannot validate, and your ISPs or other ISPs end up banning your email communication. That's the worst of all scenarios. So what you would do is that you will again use some technologies to screen through all the good guys and see how active the non-converted but good customers or leads are behaving out there, using some of the popularity stuff, trending scores, and the born on dates to figure out a marketing strategy to bring those center 40% back into the website or back into your app and keep on marketing them. So that's on the acquisition side. On the customer service side, obviously, these people are becoming your customers. You still want to take a look at their email, at how they're using their email, and use that information to send out strategic email marketing campaigns based on the activity, right? Because person could be a high SMS user and low email user, or high email user and low SMS user. You want to cater to that, to their preference, if you will, using some of this data.
Absolutely. And we're seeing so we work with a lot of very high-end mailers. So they work in the affiliate space. They do a ton of mailing. And one of the areas that they find, one of the data fields that seems to help both in fraud, but also helps them, is that opener data, knowing that this is an open email. So using some of these fields, they translate really nice to marketing. I think one of the other opportunities, not just finding high value emails, but when you want to look for your high value vendors, getting early stage email data right away can allow you to immediately recognize if you're getting bad leads from a affiliate or a sub-affiliate source or from an advertising
That's
source,
right.
so that you could early on, number one, report it, number two, not get charged for it, right? And
That's
more
right.
importantly, weed out a sub-affiliate or an entire advertising class that's sending you
That's right.
junk. So that
That's right.
early stage, I think it has benefits both to finding great customers and finding great lead sources.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. There's lots of our customers are buying leads from these lead generators. There could be thousands of leads, right? It could be good or bad or ugly coming through within an hour. You don't have time to siphon through everything. You certainly don't want to do a full-blown credit pull on every single lead that comes in. You never know what the quality of these are, right? So you want to do some lighter touch. Does the email even make sense? Was it born on date? Is this email being constructed just to defraud me? Get rid of all that 20%. Really, again, do a waterfall process on the lead buying side of the house as well.
Absolutely. So we touched a little on it, but let's be more specific. If you think about looking back 5 years ago to now, what's changed? And then if we look forward, what's changing? So
Sure.
let's give us a little bit of your perspective from someone who's been doing
5 years ago, we had iPhone 4, right? Now we got 12, 13, G5, whatever, 5G, sorry. It's just getting more faster. And what that means is that lenders, financial services companies, or even retailers have less and less and less time to figure out who are the true intent of these applicants are, right? It's just going to happen more and more with with how easy it is to make a payment on your mobile phone, how easy to apply for credit on your mobile phone. All these payment activities are happening on your phone. Tons of applications flying through, and it's so much easier for people to just kind of apply for something, right? So when you have 500, 700 milliseconds of decision time to react to this request, whether it's an application for credit or making a payment, you don't really have time to really siphon through everybody, right? So having a tool like an email validator, examine the email itself, which is out there, right? It's not a social security number or a phone number or anything like that. Really helps you to figure out how do you put together a loan origination strategy to get clear indications on who you want to deal with, who you want to spend that precious additional 2 minutes, right, to really carrying them through the loan application or the application itself. So this is going to be more faster, and that means to the audience less time to react, and you have to make that decision, as up funnel as possible.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I think the key is the speed, and I think that when you think about lending and other services, whether it's this, I think it's getting more sophisticated and more widespread, the use of any opportunity for fraud. Right. So I want to mention to the audience, we have a couple blog posts that Tim has written in the handouts section that you could take down. We also have a couple one-sheeters for our email activity metrics and our opener data, along with our email validation product. But I see I got a couple questions coming in. Let's see if I don't screw this up. So, and if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them into our, use the portal to ask a question. But the first one here is, if my budget doesn't allow for a full waterfall process, what single service or option can I use to help reduce
fraudulent intent or application probably,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. Again, it's not cheap. Doesn't mean. I just took this question, Phil. Sorry. Cheap doesn't mean better, right? So you want to find the most effective, cost-effective solution that will knock out the most amount of trash. So I think email, right? Email is certainly one of those big components on the top of your waterfall. Or you can look at some of these IP address related stuff out there as well. So you can stack email and then IP to see if the IP address is making sense, right? Has Tim ever appeared out of this IP address, or there's device ID? So there's a couple of these pseudo PII things, namely email, and also there's device related stuff that you can use up funnel, and these are, you know, less costly, for example, and more compliant in a way that if you start pulling credit information, you better make sure that you're pulling on the right identity. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole lot of compliance issues. So it's not, you know, if you find a service that charge you a penny or two per hit, it's probably you know, fool's gold, right? But you know, take a look at the email, take a look at the IP address, take a look at the device level identity stuff. Those are the three legs of the stool that you want to take a look at it up.
And so that's how you used Tower Data in the past. You've gotten that data through an API call real quickly,
Yep.
and you get it as you collect an email, you're doing an API call, you're getting the data back in real time, feeds your algorithm, and it's an inexpensive way to get a good first line.
That's right, and it's in steps, right? So if I know the email is no good, I'll show them to another route. I don't even take them through the full process. Save, again, time, right? Time is also money in that case.
All right, we got a second question. I'm not sure if I'm getting it completely right. I'll read it and then maybe I'll have to interpret it. But how do you validate if the email validator is working? What do you train the validation scores on? So let's I think I'll take the email validation question, but why don't you also answer that same question with how you validate your algorithms and make sure they're working. What do you do to train the algorithm, if you will? Our email validation process really, it's not a one-step process. There's 4 processes that we use in there. Really, we look at the domain. We have a master list of tens of thousands of valid domains, and then we have a list of many more invalid domains that we regularly see. So we can eliminate and identify bad email pretty quickly there. We look at the syntax of an email, to make sure we follow the rules.
Exactly. There's 2 things. If I put my lender hat on, I'm not a lender, by the way. We provide services and software for lenders to do what I need to do. But the answer to this question specifically is 2 things. One of them is a retro test. So you would take your data set. Don't even tell Phil what's good and bad. Take the data set and ask him to append the born on date, the velocity score, right, and all of that at a certain point in time, and then bring that data set back and do your own analysis, right? If the born on date was last Friday, I'm not going to bet I'll bet $20 with this person that shorter born on dates or a fresher born on dates most likely have a higher fraud percentage or default percentage than, you know, email's been around for a long time. So you can simply do a test with the Tower Data. And if you want to refresh data, I recommend you sign up for a service and let it run in a shadow mode. Don't even action on it for about 2-3 months. Let a couple of payment cycles run through, and then see and do a retroactive analysis. Had you used Tower Data's born on date, had you used a velocity score, right, you would have cut out 20% of the fraud or 10% of the fraud, whatever it might be. So there's 2 ways of doing it. Do a retro study with Phil, and then just let it go live and imprint it for a couple of months. You'll see some really amazing stuff coming out of this exercise.
Yeah, so and actually, I now recall the extensive study you did with us.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh, about 8 years ago.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. And I remember getting the call.
Because I was a non-believer, right, until I saw the data. I was like, oh, you know, you gotta imprint this. Let me see how it works.
Right, and it was the call of excitement that was real interesting to
That's
our
right.
team.
I had to call you on your personal phone and say, hey, look, what is this born on date? Because you didn't want to bias my opinion. So you say, hey, here's the data, go look at it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was very exciting.
Yeah,
think that those are.
There's another question about your specific offerings, and I think that question really is this. There's a whole packet of variables, right? There's tens of hundreds of variables now, I believe. But you know, the most exciting set of variables are essentially the velocity score, the popularity score, and also the born on date, right? When you get those 3 attributes at a minimum and see how well it performs on your lead siphoning as well as underwriting. You know, use those 3 things. It's perfect for everybody here. And
we have there's a handout there for you to grab. Are you pulling any other questions here?
No, it was the last bit was just a thank you from the audience.
Very good.
Yes.
All right. Well, listen, our effort in an effort to try to keep this under 30, really, we're trying to be between 20 and 25 minutes. We failed a little by a minute. However, we're really happy that you spent time. If you have any follow-up questions, certainly feel free to reach out to Tower Data. I can be reached at pdavis@towerdata.com. You could also reach us through sales@towerdata. If you have questions for Tim, certainly you can reach him at Alchemy, and we can help connect you to Tim. He's a fantastic resource. And then I just want to thank Tim for his time.
No problem. Thank you, Phil.
It's always enjoyable to catch up with you. And maybe when the world get back to normal, we could do what we used to, or we could catch up in beautiful exotic places as opposed to this way. So everyone have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. See you.